Well, hello everyone, and we are on the precipice of a new year, and so that means that I want to do something with vibrant color, kind of like a firework on a black canvas. So I go about gessoing my 18 by 24 inch canvas, and my inspiration for this painting was one painting that I did 2 videos ago, which was black and white and gold, and I thought to myself, Lydia, which is what I always call myself, why don't you do something that is kind of like that composition, but add a whole lot of color to it? And so I decided, all right, well, I'm gonna do that. So I went about sketching out a face and kind of getting some of the features where I wanted them to be, and I wanted this to be more of a straight-on thing, kind of like dreaming in Technicolor, this kind of idea or whatever, but also have the birds in it. And I'm going to do something kind of wild, which is not use conventional colors at all for the portrait or for the birds. I'm just going to use my imagination with the color, and we'll see how this comes out. Couple of things to take note of when you are drawing faces, if you're drawing a portrait, is proportions. So the eyes are actually in the center of the head. So the top of the head is up here and the chin is here. The eyes are going to run across the center of the head. It's surprising because usually the forehead and the hairline starts here and you don't actually think of the top of the head, but the eyes are in the center of the head. Another thing is the nostrils. Edge of the nostrils usually line up with the corners of the eyes. The face is usually around 5 eye widths from side to side, and the corners of the lips usually line up with the pupils of the eyes. Now in this, her eyes are going to be closed, but if they were open, you would see that they would probably line up with the pupil. I'm using regular acrylics for this underpainting, so I'm creating a grayscale by using burnt umber, Mars black, and titanium white. So painting on black canvases has kind of been my thing lately, and I've really been enjoying it, but in order to paint color on a black canvas, it's a good idea to have a grayscale underpainting underneath, because vibrant color, it doesn't really show up all that well on black canvas. So I'm using my grayscale and putting in the brightest highlights first and then working my way down to the shadows. And this way, when I add color to it, whether they're transparent colors or whether they're opaque colors, they will show up much better on the surface. My main focus when creating the underpainting is to create the structure. It's not about getting all the details in, it's more about using my brush, which is a flat brush, a number 6 flat brush by Princeton Snap, and it's just kind of molding or sculpting what the shapes are. I'm not blending, I'm not doing anything to create the detail, it's just about sculpting the underpainting. When it comes to the facial features, there is more care and detail put into things like the nose or the eyelids or something like that, but they're still relatively rough at this point. All of the detail will come in later, but as I'm working with acrylics, they're really fast drying, and so you can layer on top of them pretty quickly, which makes it really easy if you make a mistake or you're like, oh, that's way too light, I need to darken that up. You don't have to wait for it to dry, which is huge, especially when you're in the underpainting phase. I love birds. If you watch my channel at all, you probably already know that. Birds are one of the easiest things to kind of make up, in my opinion, because you can make them kind of abstract. You get the impression of a bird. They don't have to be real birds that you can recognize with your bird book and be like, oh, well, that's a goldfinch or anything like that. You can kind of just give the impression of birds. Birds represent freedom symbolically. So that's really kind of what I'm trying to get across in this painting, more than having these really realistic birds. Obviously, this isn't a super realistic painting because I don't know how many people would just stand there and have a whole bunch of different birds all over their head and shoulders and whatnot. However, So this is kind of a fun way of doing things, and you can experiment and you can use your imagination, and that's what I like to do. So, imaginative birds, that's what I'm calling them. So for the birds and for just about anything in this painting, I'm just using the values in order to block in the shapes of what I think the birds are going to look like, where I think the highlights are going to be. And it makes it a lot easier because I'm just using straight brush strokes in order to do this. I'm not blending anything, and you're getting the impression of a bird without it being super detailed. This painting doesn't actually have a ton of detail in it, even in the finished painting. So from close up, you see how messy and kind of brushstrokey everything is, and then when we move farther away, it's all going to come together. Brushstrokey, that's a new term. I just created it. Alright, so now that the foundation of the painting with the grayscale underpainting is on the canvas, now it's time to start having fun with color. The grayscale underpainting is super important because if you want to put bright color on a black canvas, you have to have something lighter underneath it for it to show up, especially with transparents, and yellows do tend to be a little bit on the transparent side. You can use the transparent colors in some of the shadow areas to create these beautiful gradients, but when it comes to bright, vibrant color, you do want to have a lighter color underneath. So one of the things I do want to stress is that reality can sometimes be really boring. You don't have to have realistic skin tones in order to convey something. There's no need for that. So what I'm doing is I'm just kind of making things really colorful, and I'm being playful with the paint. This can sometimes create a disaster, or it can create some of the most beautiful, colorful paintings you can imagine. It's just kind of knowing where you want to have your colors and deciding, oh, this is where I can put a really bright color that doesn't match anything else next to it, but it still goes with it and gives the impression of something. So it's great doing this with acrylics because if you don't like something, you can paint over it pretty quickly. But putting layers on there and expressing yourself with this, I don't know, you're trying to create, well, what I'm trying to create here, I'm not going to talk for anybody else, but I'm trying to create a lot of energy in this painting. And one of the ways that you can do that is by using color. So I thought this was kind of a cool idea, and it kind of came to me when I was painting the color of this bird that I'm painting on the right side of the face, was have the tail feathers kind of be the same color as the eyelid, so that it either looks like tail feathers or the actual eyelid. It's kind of an optical illusion, and I thought that was really kind of neat. I did a lot of the concentration of the green in this painting up towards the right top because I didn't want the painting to look completely like a rainbow. So having more of a concentration of green up in that area, I thought would kind of break it up a little bit because there wasn't a lot of green put into this painting in other areas. But yeah, I did have a lot of fun kind of figuring out what colors I wanted to make the birds, and that's part of the reason why I painted the face first, was so it would give me kind of a gauge of where I wanted other colors to be surrounding the face.
This is where I started to kind of experiment with how I wanted the chest area to just kind of fade into color. And I didn't want anything to be too detailed. I didn't want it to be like, oh, and then this is where it ends. So I decided to start just putting a whole bunch of brush strokes into that area. And then eventually what I ended up doing was creating more patches of color and really using palette knives, and then going into some more abstract elements, some solid paint markers, Posca markers, and to finish up the painting. So just creating a little bit of different texture within the painting with the palette knife and some lines, which I think just add a little bit of interest to it. And then the solid paint markers kind of give that crayon effect, which is kind of neat, just to have a little bit of different texture within the painting itself. The Posca markers, once again, to add a little bit more line work and just some of that abstraction, I think adds to it, having some really bright, vibrant colors. Very much like kind of an 80s vibe, but I was an 80s kid, so I wanted that to be kind of just a little bit of interest to the painting itself. And this is the finished painting. Very vibrant, very colorful, very energetic. Well, I hope you all enjoyed this video, and maybe you found something useful within the video that might help you in creating a really colorful painting. I hope everyone has had a wonderful New Year's, and I will see you next time. I love you guys, and happy painting. Bye for now.